On July 4, 1954, in Bay Village, a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, Sam Sheppard's wife Marilyn was found murdered in their home. Dr. Sam Sheppard, a physician, claimed that he was dozing on his living room couch when his pregnant wife Marilyn was attacked. According to his story, he rushed upstairs to stop the attack, but was briefly knocked unconscious by an intruder. Suspicion quickly fell on Sheppard, partly because it was revealed that he was having an adulterous affair. At this first trial, the local coroner testified that a pool of blood on Marilyn's pillow contained the impression of a surgical instrument, which helped the prosecution argue his guilt. After spending 10 years in prison for the first conviction, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned his conviction in 1966 because the trial was unfair due to extreme media publicity. During the second trial, the same coroner backed away from his claim about the surgical instrument work, while a medical technician testified that blood on Sheppard's watch came from blood spattered during the attack. The defense called forensic scientist Dr. Paul Kirk, who concluded that the blood spatter in the bedroom indicated the killer was left-handed, while Sheppard was right-handed, and that the blood on Sheppard's watch occurred when he tried to take Marilyn's pulse, so he was freed from prison following the retrial. Next, the Sam Sheppard case became one of the most controversial murder trials in American history, not only because of the media attention, but also because of serious problems in the investigation itself. So the first major problem is that there are no blood experts. There were no trained bloodstain pattern analysts involved in the first investigation. The police and coroner only gave basic observations instead of scientifically studying how the blood stains were formed and what they could reveal about the killer. Next, bad documentation. So the crime scene was not properly recorded. Bloodstains were poorly photographed and described, so the investigators lost important details like the direction, distance, and amount of blood. Next, attacker's position ignored. The investigators failed to use blood patterns to find out where the attacker stood and how the blows were delivered, or whether the movement matched Sheppard's story. Last but not least, Sheppard's clean clothes ignored. So when Sheppard was arrested, he had very little blood on his clothes or body, which didn't match what would be expected from someone who beat a victim so violently. Investigators ignored this clue and didn't test blood patterns on his watch properly. So later, experts explained that the blood on his watch came from when he tried to check his wife's pulse, not from committing the murder.
Next, we will analyze the problems in this case. Firstly is lack of blood experts in 1954. At that era, blood spatter analysis at the time was primitive, where interpretations were inconsistent. The investigators had no trained blood expert to analyze the spatter or infer how it could indicate attacker position, number of blows, or sequence of events. The impact of this, investigators will rely on common sense assumption rather than scientific methods. For example, they assume that the presence of blood on Sam's watch and minor blood on him will imply guilt. Critical observations like the directionality and angle of the blood spatter were either ignored or misinterpreted. Later analysis by expert Dr. Paul Kirk suggested that the blood spatter indicated a left-handed attacker, while Sam Sheppard was right-handed. So without an expert, the court accepted circumstantial interpretation as fact, increasing the likelihood of wrongful conviction. Next is poor documentations. The crime scene was so badly documented, both photographically and written reports. Key areas were either not photographed or were tampered with by police, media, or family members entering the home. The impact on this case is investigators did not properly record the exact location of blood drops, smears, or potential evidence like weapons. The timeline of events will become unclear because blood patterns were not measured or mapped, so expert testimony later was based on reconstructed scenes and not original documentation. Lastly, the jury received only a fragmented view of the scene, which allowed the prosecution to present interpretations that fit their theory, while defense arguments were harder to support without any visual proof. Thirdly is the blood spatter directionality and pattern ignored. Investigators often ignored the physical evidence that could indicate the position of the attacker relative to the victim. So the impact on this case is Bloodstain suggested that the blows came from the victim's right side, with motion consistent with a left-handed attacker. Sam Sheppard, being right-handed, would have had difficulty delivering the blows in the observed pattern. Because no blood spurt was present, hence the attacker position was not carefully analysed, the jury was not informed that the blood evidence contradicted the prosecution's theory. Hence, later re-evaluation in the 1960s and 1990s of the spatter patterns strongly supported Sam's claim that a third-party intruder committed the murder. The last problem to be analysed is Sam's clean clothes were ignored. Sam was wearing a relatively clean clothes after the attack, despite the bedroom being covered in blood. However, investigators had downplayed this fact. Intuitively, if Sam had committed the violent attack, his clothes should have had extensive blood spatter, but they didn't. The prosecution argued that the blood on his watch and small traces elsewhere were enough to imply guilt, while ignoring that his body and clothing showed minimal contamination. Later forensic analysts suggested that the blood on Sam's watch and hands could have resulted from contact transfer when he was trying to check his wife's pulse rather than active participation in the beating. Next, we will continue with the solutions to the problems. For the first problems, we could include a trained bloodstain pattern analyst at the crime scene and use scientific protocols to examine the bloodstains, such as drop size, shape and distribution, directionality and angle of impact, as well as cast-off patterns and transfer stains. Lastly, we also can cross-validate with multiple experts to reduce bias or error. Next is the solution for the second problem. Bad documentation can be improved by thoroughly photographing and videotaping the crime scene from multiple angles before anything is moved. Then create detailed sketches marking locations of all evidences, blood patterns or furnitures. Then record measurements and distances for all stains and objects. And we could also use chain of custody procedures to ensure all evidences is tracked and preserved. The solution for the third problem is we could also apply bloodstain pattern analysis to reconstruct the crime scene and determine the likely positions of the victim and attacker, the hand sequence to strike or handle the weapons, and also sequence of blows. We could also use simulations to visualize the blood trajectories and include this reconstruction in trial testimonies and to ensure the jury understands how the evidence fits or contradicts suspects' accounts. Finally, the solution for the last problem is we can collect and analyze all clothing and personal items of any potential suspect and victim. Then we can compare the blood volume, distribution and type of spatter on clothing with the patterns at the crime scene. We can also investigate another alternative reasoning or explanation such as contract transfer versus direct assault. We can use this as a part of a scientific timeline showing if a suspect clothing is consistent or inconsistent with the claim involvement. That's all from me.
Next, move on to the final recommendations and final action plan using bloodstain pattern analysis. The first one is detailed bloodstain reconstruction. The action is by re-examine the original crime scene photographs and any preserved evidence using modern bloodstain pattern analysis. By doing this, BPA can determine the point of origin, directionality, and angle of impact of bloodstains. This can reveal where the attacker was positioned, the sequence of blows, and whether the struggle aligns with Sam Sheppard's account of an intruder. The second one is to compare blood patterns to Sam's injuries. Analyze whether the blood spatter on Sam's clothing or body could realistically result from defending himself or being attacked by an unknown intruder. If patterns show that blood was consistent with someone delivering the blows rather than defending, it could support the theory that Sam was the perpetrator. The third one is by reconstruct the attack sequence. Use the BPA to map the trajectory of blood drops across the room and furniture to reconstruct the sequence of events. This can indicate whether the injuries were self-inflicted, defensive, or caused by a second person. Next recommendation is by doing the height and force analysis. Measure angles and distribution of bloodstains to estimate the height, stance, and force of the attacker. If the data aligns with Sam's height, it may suggest his involvement. If not, it may support the intruder theory. And then the last recommendation is by integrate bloodstain pattern analysis with other evidence. The action is combine bloodstain analysis with timelines, witness statement, and forensic reports to build a comprehensive case reconstruction. To justify, it provides objective, physical evidence that can confirm or contradict some claims, making it a key tool to determine whether he could realistically have been the murderer. Next, outcomes of the case. In 1954, Dr. Sam Sheppard was convicted of murdering his wife, Marilyn Sheppard. The verdict was based mainly on circumstantial evidence, his proximity to the crime scene, and his bloody appearance. Throughout the trial, Sheppard insisted he was innocent, claiming that an intruder was responsible and had committed the murder. The case attracted intense media attention, which later raised serious concerns about jury bias and the fairness of the trial. After spending nearly 10 years in prison, his conviction was overturned in 1966 due to media's influence and trial misconduct. During the retrial, Sheppard was acquitted and declared not guilty, but since the real killer was never found, the case eventually closed. In conclusion, overall, the problems, solution, recommendations, and final plan of action provide detailed insights into this case study on bloodstain pattern analysis. The importance of this analysis lies in its ability to reconstruct crime scenes, determine the positions and movement of individuals, and support or challenge witness statements. In the context of the Sam Sheppard case, proper application of bloodstain pattern analysis could have provided stronger scientific evidence and reduced reliance on circumstantial claims. This highlights the crucial role of forensic science in ensuring fair and accurate investigation. So that's all from our group's presentation. Thank you.